This video is going to go over how for you to graph a trig function. In general, a sine and a cosine function is mostly what we start with. So the first thing we need to do is remind ourselves what the sine and the cosine curve look like. Let's start with sine. We're going to go to y equals and we're going to press sine x. Then we're going to press mode, and it looks like we're in radians here labeled on our x-axis, so we're going to be in radian mode. If we were to press zoom trig, which is zoom 7, we're going to see a curve, a trig curve, but this curve is not going to be quite the window we want. We want our window to go from 0, which is what the x-axis labels, to 2 pi. So we're going to change our window, because it's in radians, to, in terms of radians, 0 to 2 pi. And it looks like they're counting by pi over 2 on the x-axis, so we're going to put pi over 2, and -4 to 4 is fine. When we hit graph, we get one full sine curve. Notice the sine curve starts at the midline. So we're going to create our first point, midline, then we're going to go up to the maximum. The maximum is at 1. So we're going to go midline, maximum, midline, minimum, midline. This is one full sine curve. Remember, sine starts at the midline. Now we're going to do a cosine curve. To do that, we're going to leave our window exactly the same, and we're just going to press y equals cosine x. Notice cosine starts at the maximum. So we're going to go to 0, 1, and we're going to do maximum, midline, minimum, midline, maximum. The cosine curve starts at the maximum and comes back to the maximum. All right, cosine kind of looks like a cup, and sine looks like an S. Remember, one full curve would be, if you can color it in underneath, if it makes one full circle, that's one full cycle. One full circle, one full cycle. So this should, when you slide it together, equal one full yellow circle or one full cycle. Now, what if we wanted to graph negative sine? We mentioned this already. The negative actually is a reflection in the x-axis. So if we hit negative sine, it's just going to go down first. So let's remind ourselves that it goes down like this. Midline, minimum, midline, maximum, midline. And that period is still 2 pi. So if we were to put in our quarter points, they would be pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Now negative cosine. We know that negative cosine is going to start at the minimum. So it's going to go midline, minimum, midline, maximum, midline, minimum. So this starts at the maximum, and it is a reflection in the x-axis, okay? Let's remind ourselves that. The quarter points will be the same, 2 pi, pi, pi over 2, and 3 pi over 2. All right, nice. So remember, when we're looking at our equation, the number in the front is the amplitude. Remember, it's the absolute value of whatever number is there. The number here is the frequency. It's also equal to 2 pi divided by the period. The period is not in the equation, but it's equal to 2 pi divided by the frequency. The midline is the number in the back plus c. It's also known as the vertical shift in the y direction, up or down, by whatever that value is. And then to get the quarter points, which we're going to need today, let's star this, we have to take the period and divide it by 4 because there are 4 quarters. Okay, so let's look at an example. The first thing we want you to do is just identify all the key information. So the amplitude is the number in the front, that's 3. The frequency is the number in front of the x, that's 1. The midline is the number in the back. If there's nothing there, that means the midline is 0, or y equals 0, which is the x-axis. The period equals 2 pi divided by the frequency. So 2 pi divided by 1 equals 2 pi. And to get the quarter points, we're going to do period divided by 4. So 2 pi is the period. 2 pi divided by 4 equals pi over 2. This means that we're going to be counting by multiples of pi over 2. We're going to be counting 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, 4 pi over 2. And notice I'm writing 4 of them because they're going to be 4 quarters. Now notice this is a sine curve, so sine is going to start at the midline, and it's a positive sine curve, so it's going to go up first. Okay, the maximum is going to be the positive 3, and the minimum is going to be negative 3. So now let's go actually graph it. This is the y equals 0, which is going to be our midline. And we're going to go up 3 units and down 3 units from our midline. Up 3 units is going to be a maximum of 3, and down 3 units is going to be a minimum of negative 3. So we have our maximum, our midline, and we have our minimum here. And now we're going to put in our quarter points. Remember, we were counting by pi over 2's. So I'm going to do every 3 boxes make a quarter point. Okay, so I'm going to count from 0. I'm going to count 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, which equals pi, 3 pi over 2, 4 pi over 2, which equals 2 pi. And now I'm going to make my sine curve. You guys remember it's a sine curve, so it starts at the midline. So I'm going to go midline, and now when I go to my first notch, I'm going to go to the maximum because it's a positive sine curve. Then I'm going to go back to the midline in line with my quarter point, and then now I'm going to go to my minimum in line with my quarter point. So negative 3 in line with my quarter point, and then back to my midline. So every notch, every quarter point is going to get a point. There's actually 5 total points, the starting point, and then the 4 quarter points. For 5 total points. Now connect the dots in a smooth fashion, and here's your sine curve. Notice it has an amplitude of 3. Now let's go to the next one. The next one says sine x minus 3. The amplitude is 1, the frequency is 1, the midline is y equals negative 3, AFM. The period is 2 pi over 1, which is 2 pi. The quarter points is period divided by 4, which is 2 pi over 4, or pi over 2 again, same. Now we have to think about the maximum and the minimum. So what I want you to do is I want you to go to your graph, and I want you to go down to negative 3. 1, 2, 3. And I want you to put a dotted line at your negative 3. This is my midline. So before, my midline here, remember, was my x-axis. Now I'm going to be going down 3 units in the y direction to negative 3. Now, the amplitude was 1. So the 1 tells me I'm going to go up and down 1 unit up and 1 unit down from my midline. 1 unit up from my midline is 4. 1 unit down from my midline is, oh my goodness, I'm wrong. Sorry, I'm at negative 3. 1 unit up is negative 2, and 1 unit down is negative 4. So my maximum is negative 2, and my minimum is negative 4. Negative 2, negative 4. Okay? And this is a sine curve still, so it's going to start at the midline, and then it's going to go up first to the maximum. So let's put in our same quarter points from before. They are 1 pi over 2, sorry, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, 4 pi over 2, which equals 2 pi. Now I want you to go to your midline. Start at your midline, which is negative 3. So you're at the y-axis. Start here at your midline. Now you're going to go up to your maximum. So your maximum is negative 2. So just hit that maximum at negative 2 at the first notch. Then go back to your midline, back to your minimum, and back to your midline. So basically this is a sine curve. It does go up to the maximum first. Nice smooth fashion. But notice it's been shifted down into y equals negative 3, and the amplitude is 1. Let's do another one. Now we're going to do cosine. Here we go. AFM. Amplitude is 1. Frequency is 1/2. Midline is nothing, so it's 0. Period is 2 pi over frequency. So 2 pi over 1/2 equals 2 pi times 2, which is 4 pi. Remember, keep, change, flip. And lastly, the quarter points are period divided by 4. So 4 pi divided by 4 equals pi. That means we're counting by pi. So we're going to count 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi. All right? So this is a cosine curve. Cosine starts at the maximum, so keep that in mind. The midline is 0. So let's go to our midline of 0 first, and let's make a line. Okay, this is our midline. That's like our baseline. Now we're going to go up and down by our amplitude. The amplitude is 1. So we're going to go up 1 unit and down 1 unit from the midline. Up 1 and down 1. So it's going to be alternating between the midline of 0 and then the maximum of 1 and the minimum of -1. Now let's put in our quarter points. Our quarter points are in terms of pi. We're going to count 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, and 4 pi. So the period should end, the one graph should end at the period. If the period is 4 pi, then the one graph should end right here at the period of 4 pi. So this is cosine. It's going to start at the maximum. So we said the maximum here is 1. So we're going to go to 0, 1. Then we're going to go midline, minimum, midline, maximum. So here is your one smooth cosine curve. And then the last one. This is also cosine, but it's negative. The amplitude is still, the absolute value is still positive 2, but negative cosine means it's going to start at the minimum. Okay, so the midline is 0. So let's go to y equals 0. We'll start at our midline, and we'll place that line here first, midline. Then we're going to go up and down by our amplitude, okay? So we're going to go up 2 units and down 2 units from 0. Up 2 units is going to be a maximum of 2, and down 2 units is going to be a minimum of -2. Now let's do our frequency and our period. Our frequency is 1. The number in front of the x is 1. And our period is 2 pi divided by 1, which is 2 pi. And then our quarter points are period divided by 4. So if we do 2 pi divided by 4, we're going to get pi over 2. So that means that we're going to be counting by multiples of pi over 2. So go to 0, start, then we're going to count 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, which is equal to pi, 3 pi over 2, 4 pi over 2, which is equal to 2 pi. Notice our period is 2 pi. We should be ending at our period, which is 2 pi. Was this sine or cosine? It was cosine. Was it positive or negative cosine? Negative cosine. So we're going to start at our minimum. To start our minimum, we're going to start at -2. So we're going to go minimum, midline, maximum, midline, minimum. Connect the dots, and there's your negative cosine curve. Now, what may show up on the regions, you ask? Well, here is a regions question. On the axes below, sketch one cycle, so that means one full curve of a cosine function. Circle that, and then it has some key information. Okay, so the amplitude is 3. Let's write that down. The midline is y equals -1. That's very important. I always like to start with my midline, okay? So let's start at -1. Go to -1 and plot that dotted line. Label it y equals -1 and label it midline. All right? Now we're going to count up and down by our amplitude. So we're going to count 3 units up and 3 units down from -1. 3 units up, 1, 2, 3 is actually 2. 3 units down, 1, 2, 3 is actually -4. So that means that our maximum value is 2 and our minimum value is -4. And we're going to be alternating between our key values of our midline, our maximum, and our minimum. So we're alternating between -1, 2, and -4. Now this says it's a cosine curve, so keep in mind cosine usually starts at the maximum or the minimum, and it says it's passing through the point 0, 2. So 0, 2 is going to be x equals 0, y equals 2, which is this point here. So to me that means you're going to start at your maximum. If you're starting at your maximum, this means that it is a positive cosine curve. Okay, so the last thing we need to put in are our quarter points. To do that, let's put in our period first, which is pi over 2. And let's get our quarter points from that. Quarter points is period divided by 4. Pi over 2 divided by 4 equals pi over 2 times the reciprocal of 4 is 1/4. So we get pi over 8. This means that we're counting by pi over 8. So let's start at 0. That's going to be our first point, right? And then we're going to count 1 pi over 8, 2 pi over 8, 3 pi over 8, and 4 pi over 8. Sorry. How do I get rid of that? 1 pi over 8, 2 pi over 8, 3 pi over 8, 4 pi over 8. So it looks like you can't count by 3s. You have to count by 2s here. I just tried it. So this is going to be 1 pi over 8, 2 pi over 8, 3 pi over 8, and 4 pi over 8. Remember, 4 pi over 8 reduces down to pi over 2, which is our period. Now it's a cosine curve. It's a positive cosine curve. So we're going to start at our maximum of 0, 2. So we're going to hit that first, maximum. Now we got to go to our midline. So we're going to go to this first notch, pi over 8, and hit the midline of -1. Now we're going to get to the next quarter point and go down to the minimum, -4. Now back to the midline, and now back to our maximum. So make sure it's looking good. Make sure that the amplitude is the same, 3 units up and 3 units down. Make sure it's a nice smooth curve. It says to graph 1 full cycle, so technically I'm done. I would want to make sure everything is labeled, my quarter points are labeled, and I'm good to go. The last one, another Regents question. Here we go. This one's giving us what we call a restricted domain. Restricted domain means they want us to graph specifically in the interval 0 to 2 pi, starting at 0, ending at 2 pi. So let's write down our key information. A, F, M. The amplitude is 3, the frequency is 2, the midline is y equals 2. So I'm going to start at my midline of y equals 2. Put that in. Label it midline. Label it y equals 2. Okay, that's important. That's like your baseline. Now I'm going to go up and down by my amplitude. So I'm going to go up 3 units and down 3 units from 2. So 2 plus 3 is 5. 2 minus 3 is -1. So our maximum is 5, just 2 plus 3, and our minimum is 2 minus 3, -1. Okay, so we're going to be alternating between these 3 key values, our maximum, our midline, and our minimum. Okay, now let's find our quarter points by finding our period first. The period is 2 pi over the frequency. The frequency is 2. So 2 pi divided by 2 equals pi. So the period is pi. So my one full curve would end at pi. But my quarter points are period divided by 4. So we're going to do pi over 4. This means along the x-axis, I'm going to count 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, let's write it, 4 pi over 4. But if we stop there, are we going to do it all the way to 2 pi? No, one full curve is going to equal pi, right? Fit into pi. So we basically going to have to do 2 full curves in 2 pi, and that is the concept of the frequency. We will see 2 full curves in 2 pi, and that's what they want from us, okay? So let's just see if we can fit our quarter point. All right, it looks like we can't count by 3, so let's count by 2. So we're going to count here. 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4. And this is what I recommend you guys use pencil whenever you're graphing. So this would have been 1 full curve. I'm going to tell you I'm going to keep counting because I have to go all the way to 2 pi. And I'm only at 1 pi right now, so I'm going to keep going. 5 pi over 4, I'm counting in terms of pi over 4. 6 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4, 8 pi over 4. 8 pi over 4 equals 2 pi. Now I'm going to start graphing. This is sine. Sine starts at the midline. So we're going to start at my midline, which is 2. So my first point is going to be 0, 2. Now I'm going to go, this is a positive sign, so I'm going to go up to my maximum. So my first quarter point is pi over 4. I'm going to go up to my maximum here, okay? And erase that dotted thing, but now you guys can see. So I'm going to go midline, maximum, midline, go down to my minimum, back to my midline. Connect the dots. This is one full curve. Notice one full curve fits into pi, and our period is pi. But they didn't ask me to do one full curve. They asked me to go 0 to 2 pi. So I have to keep going. So I'm going to follow the pattern. Midline maximum, midline minimum, midline maximum, midline minimum, midline. All right, so make sure you're alternating between those key values. Midline maximum, midline minimum, midline maximum, midline minimum, midline maximum, midline minimum. Do you guys see this as two full sine curves in a 2 pi interval? And that makes sense because the frequency equals 2. All right, thanks for listening.